every time you are away from streaming, some sort of political or natural disaster occurs. So I'm not saying it's entirely your fault, Stephen. I'm sure climate change played a role in it, but I can't say that you're not partially responsible for everything that's happened in the United States. So shame on you. Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton obviously have devastated the Southeast, but what has compounded that situation in the world of politics is all the disinformation, misinformation, which is pervading, mostly from Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans and the entire media apparatus. So the lies that have been pervading are things like, FEMA's not on the ground, or FEMA is on the ground, but they're only offering you $750, not just of preliminary aid, but of total aid. They're not going to help you with anything else. As a matter of fact, they could help you with more, but unfortunately, President Biden and Vice President Harris, they raided the coffers. They robbed Peter to pay Paul. They took the Natural Disaster Relief Fund and actually sent it towards undocumented migrants at the southern border. Donald Trump and MAGA Republican politicians have been signal boosting these lies incessantly on X, other aspects of social media, on camera, at the same time that Republican state and local leaders are saying this is all nonsense.
I don't know if you saw this, but wow, guys, we have 2 more events that are coming up before the election. Progressive Victory is organizing an event that I will be at for at least one day in Las Vegas that's happening on October 26th and October 27th. And then if you can't make that one and you'd prefer to go canvass over in Pennsylvania, there is an event on the 2nd and 3rd. The Democratic National Convention, the DNC, somebody for the Democrats is organizing that one. I won't be at that one, but other DGGers might sign up. If you're interested, check out the link in the description below or go to progress.win to sign up for either of those events. The 2 lies that you just spoke about were like the better lies, because there are 2 even more insidious lies that I saw going around that were getting pretty popular. And then one was referenced in a call that I'll ask if you think was real or not. The first lie, the really bad one, but not the worst one, was that the money that FEMA gives you is a loan. And so if you ended up taking money from FEMA, they're going to come back and they're going to make you pay it back, or they're going to take your house, was one. And then a second one I saw that was accompanied by just random videos, like 20-second shots of helicopters. The second one I saw was FEMA is actually showing up, but the only reason why they're showing up is to stop other people from saving civilians. That the helicopters and FEMA and everybody are showing up to destroy the humanitarian supplies that have been collected by other people, and to just hamper the rescue efforts for God knows what is even the reason they would think that would be the case. But yeah. And then
so I have heard those. Well, also, while you're saying that, I'm thinking some of the other ones, like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that Hurricanes Helene and Milton were actually a product of a secret government weather controlling apparatus. Well, she said they, so she could have also been referring to the Jews, given her history of anti-Semitic remarks. So we have no idea. Either liberals, the Jews, liberal Jews, we don't know for sure. Also, that FEMA is actually, when they do rescue, they're trying to seize land for lithium in order
for
to
the
mine
lithium
it
deposits
for batteries. Yeah. So it's just like one thing after another. But yeah, it's really dangerous and scary stuff. And it's actually so bad that FEMA had to put up a basically rumor debunking section of their website for the first time, where they're like, these lies are so pervasive and they're all over the place that we actually have to go line by line and fact check them. And of course, Elon Musk has played a role in this as well, making it worse. But this is huge, man. It's insane. We've not seen this sort of dis and misinformation about natural disasters in recorded American history. This is exponentially increased. I wonder what you think about that.
I worry. We've talked about this a lot. I don't know if my doomerism came off in the last in the canvassing event that we just did, but I don't know if we've already crossed a threshold. But the unification of Elon Musk, Donald Trump, intellectually corrupted members in the House, and I guess the social media landscape in general are all working together in a way that I have never seen before to pump out misinformation. It's incredibly scary, incredibly damaging. I'm curious for your opinion. I saw on my subreddit that there was a call posted where a guy had called into a radio program who sounded like he was tearing up because his father or father-in-law was basically refusing supplies from FEMA, saying that he didn't trust them, he didn't want to pay back a loan, he was waiting for somebody else to show up. Do you have any idea if that call was real? Or I don't know if any more information came out about that, or I don't know if you even heard it or what I'm referring to.
My father-in-law lives just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, and he was badly damaged by Hurricane Helene, and he has refused all FEMA help because he's a hardcore Trumper, and he literally believes that if he accepts anything from FEMA, they're going to take his house. I don't understand how so many people are under the spell of this freaking con man. I don't understand it.
Well, it's absolutely heartbreaking about your father-in-law. I'm so sorry to hear it. I hope.
And it's hard to even imagine it. I mean, he lost almost everything, and he's refusing all help from the federal government and complaining to us that he doesn't have food, that he doesn't have the stuff he needs, and yet he won't accept the help. What the hell are we supposed to do? We're not in a position to be able to fly across the country and help him. Yeah. There's people begging us to get him to accept help, and he won't do it.
Wow.
And I guarantee you, I'm not the only one. I guarantee you, I'm not the only one.
I wish there was something I could say as to, I don't know. Does he have access to any electronics where you could send him some information debunking this, and that he might?
We've done all of that. We've sent him all the FEMA bulletins. We've sent him all the stuff from the fact checkers. He doesn't believe it. He thinks he just believes Trump. Literally, Dan, it's a cult. He's a cult member. I'm sorry to say it. He's a cult member. And he's my father-in-law, and it sucks.
No, I did hear the call. It went viral. It was even retweeted by Vice President Harris's official, campaign Twitter. So not to say that it's guaranteed that call is legit, but it seems to me that if the vice president's own official Twitter page was going to regurgitate it, that it has some factual basis. But let's just assume that specific call is fake. Let's just grant the cynical premise that it's not true. Is it really outside the realm of possibility that there are people in these situations Stephen, when we linked up for the canvassing event, we discussed your mother, and I've said that, my late mother was a big fan of Donald Trump. She died before the 2020 election, but we have family members and friends who I could easily see in the situation described in that phone call, where they're just sitting in the ruins of their home, in the ground zero of a natural disaster, because they fear that the Biden-Harris administration will either not help them or will thwart them. I could easily see that happening.
You probably can't make it out from here, but my mom sends me all of these messages. It absolutely does not surprise me. She sent me one for wouldn't it be crazy if one of the richest lithium deposits in the world was right outside of Asheville, North Carolina? Wouldn't it be crazy if the largest lithium mining company in the world, 3 days before the flood began, submitted the permits for their mine rights? Or she sends me all of this stuff. This doesn't surprise me at all. If it is fake, it could absolutely be real. But obviously, I'm always super paranoid that somebody's trying to.
And the other thing I think is worth noting here. Well, no, I was just going to say, and there could be some lag here, which might be if we're stumbling over each other. But what I was going to say was the other thing that's so important about this is it would be bad enough, Stephen, if these were just legions of MAGA voters peddling this disinformation or this misinformation. It would be bad and dangerous enough. But what makes this even more insidious is you have elected members of Congress. You have Republican politicians who, quite frankly, should be held to a higher standard than the voters. We used to believe in the Uncle Ben Spider-Man notion that with great power comes great responsibility. And so you should hold your elected officials to a higher standard. This is being signal boosted by Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the reason, and not just Marjorie Taylor Greene, but also, again, other MAGA Republicans, it's so important to note because as the election rapidly approaches, what we hear all the time is, this both sides, right? Both sides engage in dis and misinformation. This is a further nail in the coffin that there is no counterpart. There is no Democrat like Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's no Democratic counterpart to MTG. There's no Democratic counterpart to Donald Trump. Yes, precisely. And the list goes on and on and on.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but
bullshit that people peddle.
The House Republicans are insane. I have to tell people that, oh, did you see this thing that came out of the House? If it comes from the House Republicans, you cannot trust it. It is meaningless. You can read the material and try to fact check it, but you can never take anything that comes at face value from the House Republicans. The stuff they publish in there is insane. It's actually insane. Sorry, we could go on, but yeah, Jesus, holy Christ, yeah.
Well, and what's also funny too is I'll give you actually we should not hang our hats on this. This is nothing. It's sad that this is even noteworthy, but it is in the political context. So there is a Florida freshman congresswoman who she represents one of Florida's districts in the United States House of Representatives. Her name is Anna Paulina Luna, and she's one of the more infamous incoming freshman Republicans. She actually hosted a town hall with Donald Trump into Hurricane Helene, like as Hurricane Helene was going on. And she signal boosted his lies. She said things like, Mr. President, this is just my opinion, but I totally agree with you that FEMA's not doing what they can to help the American people. And you need to do more, FEMA. And then she was one of the Republicans who voted against, just weeks earlier, additional FEMA funding, number one. She voted against it, struck it down. Number two, days after she signal boosted all these lies, she gets a phone call from President Biden. And apparently they have a really good phone call such that Anna Paulina Luna goes on Twitter and says, hey, I just got off the phone with President Biden. He was really helpful. He said that the federal government's going to foot the bill for debris removal and all these things. And actually, Speaker Mike Johnson, you need to reconvene Congress in order to pass additional FEMA funding. So again, it's staggering that a Republican congresswoman is actually for a brief moment doing her goddamn job, and actually acknowledging that the Biden-Harris administration is doing its job. And she's publicly calling the Republican speaker to reconvene so they can have additional funding that she voted against just weeks ago. And so to me, it's just the whole thing is so staggering. And then the last thing I'll say is in response to that, Mike Johnson has reaffirmed that he will not reconvene Congress, and they're just going to have to deal with it when they go back into session. And this abdication of duty is something that I wish more Americans cared about. The election should not be this close.
It absolutely should not be this close. Also, when you not to hang our hat on it, like you said, I won't hang my hat on it, okay? The question that I have then is, when something like that happens, and somebody wants to give credit to somebody for figuring something out, right? Like, imagine you have a friend who's been driving their car for 2 years, and then you take a ride with them to work, and you pull out of the garage, and the car is like, and you're like, hey, and they were driving a man, you're like, you can switch out of first gear, you know that, right? And they've had the car for 2 years, and they go, oh, that makes it so much simpler. Like, am I willing to give the person credit for something that they probably should have known in the beginning? Like, when you talk about this call between Biden and the Republican lawmaker, did she just not know? Did she just have no fucking idea how FEMA or the president or any with the response? Does she not know how it even works? And then when Biden called her, she's like, oh, whoa, that's actually really cool. Mike, we need to come back in and talk about this. This is crazy. We should actually vote for more. Like, what? Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Some speculate that all it took, these people, I think there's a narcissism, not just to Trump, obviously, there's a malignant narcissism, but I think there's a narcissism which underpins MAGA Republican, prominent MAGA Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert. I'm sure you would agree. I think it was just the fact that she got a phone call from the most powerful man in the world, made her feel like really warm and fuzzy. And he's basically just telling her exactly hey, listen, we are doing everything we can. We are going to foot the bill on debris removal. What can we do to help your district? Shit that's basically been said already, but the fact that she's hearing it from Biden's mouth. And here's where I wanted to bring this up to you. So after all this, Stephen, she goes on your buddy Benny Johnson's podcast.
Oh, God.
Okay, your Piers Morgan frenemy. And even Benny Johnson is praising Joe Biden. This is what I don't understand. The same people who are signal boosting the lies about Biden, not just about hurricane relief and everything else, are now isn't it great that leaders can come Biden can work with Ron DeSantis, and that he can actually support a flamethrower like you. That's what he called her, a flamethrower, Anna Paulina Luna. And so here's what I don't understand. How long will this last? How long will this public praise of Biden last? Because I don't know if I would give it till Monday.
Yeah, who knows? Sorry also, guys, if it's a little bit laggy, it's because Jessiah here is coming from deep within the chambers of the Capitol building, deep underground, so the Discord connection is not the best. But yeah, I'm also really big on the... When I would fight with people online, I would notice that some people would do this. And so I use the same standard now for lawmakers, for people in media. You do not get to get credit 2 times every time. You can't do that. You can't get to virtue signal about how horrible and abhorrent a particular issue is and then collect all of the righteous fury and positive feedback from your audience for speaking truth to power and then immediately correct yourself afterwards when you realize, oh, what I just said was total fucking bullshit. And then be like, guys, yeah, this is actually not true. Here's this. And then have your audience go, oh my God, so brave of you for like changing your mind and like following the facts. And this is why we follow you. Sure, you can do this like once or twice. But if this is like a pattern of behavior, it's literally, this is the hack that we all dreamed up in Catholic school in 5th grade when we're like, wow, there's the sacrament of confession. Like, what if we just go and murder like 500 people and then ask God for forgiveness? Like, we should be good and we can just do that over and over again, right? And it's like, well, no, proper contrition doesn't work that way. Much the same way that you shouldn't get credit for being correct or for coming around on something if you were like intentionally lying in the beginning with no due diligence whatsoever. Especially, this is their job. They're lawmakers. This is actually their job, right? You can argue maybe media misinformation or maybe maybe how they tweet or what they do on their social media accounts or their public statements maybe are one thing. But literally things like voting on FEMA and allocating funds to their district and representing their constituents in front of the body of Congress or to the president. This is actually what they are elected to do. So yeah, but sorry, yeah. We can go back and forth on this particular story. I hate that all of these are. This story alone is like a 4-year defining moment, but it'll just be another moment lost in time, like all the other insane moments have been. Yeah, sorry.
Well, no, I was going to say, so the reason we spent so much time on this is because, unfortunately, this is eaten up. I mean, obviously, again, there's the natural disaster component. Lives were lost. Infrastructure was wiped out. I mean, just a lot of damage to it. But politically, this ate up most of the past 2 weeks. Another story that I want to talk about, though, is actually really, really fresh. So Mark Milley, who was Donald Trump's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that is the senior military advisor to the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense, the highest-ranking officer in the United States military. He retired after continuing to serve under President Biden. He retired back in 2023. Well, we just received information from an upcoming book by Bob Woodward, who's a legendary journalist who broke the Watergate scandal. You know, if there was one person single-handedly responsible for killing President Nixon's political career, it was Bob Woodward. Well, in this upcoming book, General Milley is interviewed, and he tells Woodward that Donald Trump is the most dangerous man in the country. Was in severe cognitive decline and a fascist, okay? Now, again, you want to talk about a 40-year defining moment, which should be a game changer politically, but no one on the right gives a single solitary about. What do you think? I mean, again, because I know you at your at least your mom, I think both your parents, but I know your mom was a veteran. So how is it? What does it mean that the highest ranking conservative member of the United States military who knew this man, worked for him loyally, says he's the most dangerous man in the world, he's a fascist, he's unfit for office, he's in mental decline? What do you think about all this, man?
Did you see Milley calling Trump a fascist? Let's see if my mom responds in the next 5 minutes. I'm curious what she'll say. I know what she'll say. She'll say, oh, Milley's a rhino. That's what she'll say. That's what they say for all of them. You bring up the Woodward stuff in Nixon. Woodward also had the big book on Trump, but or the big expose. He wrote a book on it, I believe, right? I don't remember what it's called, but
he did. He wrote several. He wrote the most recent one. Is Peril, which is a really good book. It's part of a trilogy, transitioning from the last days of the Trump administration into the first days of the Biden administration. And this one, I believe, is called War.
Gotcha.
It's not released yet, but it'll be dropping on Monday.
I'll be honest. When you bring up Woodward and recent stuff, the thing that I am seeing the most, and God, I wish there was video camera footage of this, assuming it really happened, as he says it did. But it was some of the quotes that he had about. Wait, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah, you cut out on me pretty bad.
I was going to say the Woodward quote that stands out to me the most were some of the ones that he had about Biden coming out. I'm imagining the WCK attacks or whatever, when they obviously messed up, there's something bad. And that quote of Biden, I'm just imagining him putting down the phone and being like, Bibi, what the f***? There were some, that what I just said was an exact quote, supposedly. Bibi, what the f***? Mm-hmm. There were some very funny quotes from Biden about Netanyahu there, assuming they're true or whatever. But yeah, I agree. I mean, huge. He's untouchable. I don't know if any single person could come out, because I'm thinking, like, who would be the most damning person against Trump? Nobody cares that Melania has kind of like disappeared. Nobody cares that his vice president, who had like the most conservative voting record, almost like anybody, in terms of disposition. Who? I don't know. I don't know who. You know, you had people, your strongest Trump warriors, your McCarthys, are now considered rhinos. It doesn't matter. Trump is very much like untouchable. Maybe if a family member came out against him, but probably not.
I don't even know that. I don't even know that. I think that Trump, made a prophecy when he said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. I do believe that we're seeing the culmination of that. I mean, it's a total abdication of the Republican Party's claims to be pro-military, pro-national defense, pro-patriotism, that you have a lifelong veteran, a man with a storied career, a combat veteran, who served under both administrations or both parties, and then he was appointed to his post. I should say, Donald Trump picked him, and Donald Trump only picks the very best people. But again, they don't care about that either. He points the very best people, and they'll stick with that, except when he points the very best people who disagree with him. Well, that was an exception, but it's an exception which doesn't reflect on Trump, either morally or in terms of his ability to delegate and hire people. They just like, it's water. They always find a way, the path of least resistance, in a way to avoid giving Trump any accountability. But the other thing to know is I still think this sort of thing would kill the career of any other politician, at least a Democrat. I think let me put it like this. I think if Mark Milley came out and said the same shit about President Biden, whom he also served, even in 2024, that would be the end. Like, that would be a scandal that would latch on to Harris. Everybody would be flipping out about it. But Trump is this exception. And it's incredibly dangerous, and it goes back to things that we talked about before, which is we cannot have a functioning society, not just we obviously have to have some sort of shared factual reality, but we also have to have some shared value set. And this is part of the reason why I don't know if I buy this idea anymore about, so-called American values. I don't even know what American values are anymore, given that 50% of the country seems to have abandoned the values that they used to claim were American. So again, a notion of truth and responsibility and civic engagement, and with power comes responsibility. I don't know what any of that means anymore. And that's why I think so much is riding on this election, because if Donald Trump is rewarded for all of this stuff, what will it mean for the next election, even if he leaves office in 2028? I think that we have gone past the point of no return if Trump wins this election.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's a symptom and a cause, and I mean, like, symptomatically, Trump is so popular for a reason, but he also furthers the cause at the same time. There's definitely an issue right now with our society that somebody like him could be so popular, but he also exacerbates it and makes it worse. Yeah, those are good talking points, though. I approve of them. Whoever you've been listening to, very good on that. We definitely have to have a shared value set. We definitely have to be in a world where we're all kind of like playing by the same rules, because otherwise things necessarily collapse, and descend into absurdity. So give me a final, anything else quick that's going on, anything we should keep our eyes open to on the horizon.
So I would just say a couple of things. So President Obama is on the campaign stump, and so is President Clinton for Kamala Harris in these next, 20-something, 25 days. So they're like, they're out making the speeches, they're out making deliveries. Obama had a barn burner in his Pittsburgh speech where, by the way, he also flexed, which Democrats don't do. He talked about how there's an amnesia surrounding Trump, and Trump tries to take credit for anything, but Obama passed off a pretty good economy to Trump. He says people tend to discount that, but it's true. So definitely want to keep an eye on how these stump speeches will impact the election, because Obama is still the most popular person in the Democratic Party, bar none. So I'm glad they're bringing out the big guns. I will say, with respect to the election, we are seeing an increasing number of right-leaning pollsters that tend to be more conservative in general, and it's being reflected in the poll results. So a lot of doomerism being spread. And listen, this is going to be a very close election unless it totally defies the odds. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a 270, 268, sort of split. And so we should brace ourselves accordingly. But I will also say the New York Times Siena poll for Arizona and Pennsylvania just dropped today, and Trump is leading in Arizona, but he's behind in Pennsylvania. Harris is leading. So just keep this in mind, that this is within the margin of error. Nate Silver, 538, the Silver Bulletin, Cook Political Report, they still favor Harris, even now, over Trump. But we cannot get complacent, and that's why the Wisconsin canvassing events that you and Progressive Victory orchestrated, these things are extremely important. People need to keep the faith. They need to turn out and vote. But right now, even though the polls are tightening, Harris is still favored. So we still have a shot here.
Yeah, I'm just constantly reminded every time I see these like memes posted on X or posted on Reddit where it's like American population, candidate A or candidate B, which one is like Hitler? 82% candidate A. American population poll, which candidate cares about being a good person? Candidate A, 92%. Candidate B, 8%. Which politician seems like they would murder a homeless person? And it's like candidate A, 12%. Candidate B, like 88%. And then it's like, who would you vote for? And it's like 49-51 split. And I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, wait, what is happening? I don't know. All right, well, hey, listen, thanks for catching up. I look forward to you returning to the United States, and so we don't have to communicate via satellite international connection. I think Elon Musk is sabotaging our communication, but
100%.
Thank you very much.
He's terrified of this, man. He's terrified. He knows the superpower here. He knows what DGG is capable of. He's definitely going to mute Pisco, I think, in your next conversation.
Yeah, you think so? Okay, well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Oh, man. It's bad. It's really bad, right?
Yeah, it's bad.
It's every like few days there's a new like what should be an election ending thing.
Yeah, everything. The dogs thing by itself. The dogs thing by itself.
The dogs thing?
You don't even remember eating the cats, eating the dogs?
I don't even remember because now in my head there's it's the Elon Musk rally thing, the donation thing, the thing removed from Twitter on Vance is still there because a new article for the sorry. Okay, we need to okay.
Also, don't ask me about the Elon Musk donation thing. I don't know anything about it.
Hello, Pisco. Welcome to our weekly
How you
update
doing,
that has
Steven?
taken a couple weeks off. I've been out of town. We've been doing stuff, but yeah, catch us up. What's been going on?
Yeah, it's good to be back. First of all, welcome back. And yeah, we have two stories this week in the legal news. The first is our good friend Jack Smith, the special counsel into the investigations into Donald Trump. He released a filing recently, which is addressing some of these issues from the Supreme Court's immunity decision. You recall that, Stephen?
I do indeed recall that.
Yeah, we don't really agree with the immunity decision, Stephen and I. We think that it's textual. We think it's not supported by the structure of the Constitution. And we basically think that out of whole cloth, the Supreme Court, in a decision by Chief Justice Roberts, manufactured or legislated from the bench to create this immunity doctrine that has no foundation in our history or the structure of the Constitution. That said, we're respecters of the law. And when the Supreme Court says what the law is, the lower courts and certainly federal prosecutors are bound to accept that law as precedent. And so Jack Smith, in order to comply with the Supreme Court's ruling, needed to make certain findings of fact and present them to the court to see if they're going to agree with the court. Now, what findings of fact they have to make relate to whether or not certain conduct that Donald Trump is being indicted for is quote unquote official conduct or unofficial conduct. You can imagine the president's role is pretty broad in our system of government. At its maximal, you might even say the president has an official duty to speak in the bully pulpit to the general public. Obviously, the president has a lot of responsibilities in negotiating with even states, right? I mean, right now we were talking about President Biden's response and Kamala Harris's response to the hurricanes and the natural disasters. The president has a lot of role.
Real quick, just to expand on that a little bit. So for the immunity decision passed by the court, Roberts basically defined 3 different categories of actions that a president could theoretically take or could take, right? That an action will either be something that is basically like essential and exclusively in the purview of the president. It's a thing that only he can do. Congress, nobody else can even touch that action. And that when he's performing those actions, he should be beyond all form of criminal review. You can't even ask questions about it. You can't use it as evidence towards another crime. The second bucket, he said, he called them official acts, but they might not be things that only the president could do. So there's going to be some level of presumptive immunity, which is a new thing, I believe, that's been created by Roberts, meaning that if you want to prosecute a president for doing an act, so this might be something that he does, but Congress also can kind of like do this as well, or they might have like authorized it via statute or something like that, that you have to make an argument in front of the court before you even go to court. You have to make the argument that if we probe on this action, it's not going to do damage to the executive that would prevent them from carrying out their job. And then the third thing is unofficial acts. And now these 3 buckets have been kind of, I'm not going to do the both sides thing. I was going to say weaponized by people on both sides. It's not, because in the most extreme version on the left side, the worry is, well, what if the president in an official act starts assassinating political rivals? Now, people on the right assure us that, well, that can't happen because that's not an official act. Okay. I mean, Roberts didn't address that very issue that was brought up by Sotomayor in the dissent, and he had the opportunity to. They passed these drafts around, and he chose not to address that particular hypothetical, which was annoying. And so now we're on the second two things, which we're going to get into, the official acts and unofficial acts. But the scary thing is, like you said, well, what is an official act or versus an unofficial act? Going by the structure of how this ruling is, as much as I hate it, I can see a world where you do delineate, but the thing that's going to trigger me even more than that particular ruling is if the Supreme Court quibbles over these delineations. And I can already see ways in reading things that I'm going to get unimaginably triggered. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that I agree largely with your analysis there. I would say that the core executive authorities is a subset of official. So there's kind of two, it grounds out into three buckets, but they're kind of two categories, which is official, unofficial, and then core, and you could say non-core. And as you said, the core relates to something within the executive's preclusive and exclusive authority. And so, yeah, it grounds out into those three buckets largely, but things that are unofficial are not protected at all. And as you're saying, sometimes it can be hard to see what is official and what's not official, especially with respect to actions that involve other government officials, but maybe not the purpose of what those government officials are around for. And so, yes, in this case, I could very much see some quibbling if this will get to the Supreme Court, and it almost certainly will get to the Supreme Court at some point. Yeah. However, what the Supreme Court asked Jack Smith to do is to have some kind of evidentiary-based, some fact-based findings in order to conclude initially whether or not something is in one of these buckets or another bucket. And you can imagine that makes sense, Stephen, because the whole point of the immunity doctrine is to have these kinds of incentives and to prevent these cases from coming to fruition before you go to trial, right? Like, we don't want to try the case to see if you can try the case. And so that's why the Supreme Court is pushing for there to be an evidentiary ruling early before the trial. Otherwise, the kind of immunity doctrine would be obviated if we're just having the trial anyway, and at the back end we have to find out whether something is official or unofficial. So when people are complaining, hey, how come Jack Smith is releasing all this stuff? He is doing no more and no less than what the Supreme Court is asking him to do. And I disagree with people like Ellie Honig who say otherwise, and we can get into that at some other point in time. But yeah, any comments on that, on the timing or on what's being asked of Jack Smith?
No, I think I understand you.
Yes, and the unofficial actions, those are things that are outside of the outer perimeter of the president's kind of duties as the president of the United States. And so in this particular filing that Jack Smith is submitting to the district court in Washington, D.C., he is essentially making the following argument based on certain case law in the D.C. Circuit that when a president is also running for office, when he's wearing the hat of presidential candidate as a candidate for office, he is doing things that are unofficial. But when he's wearing the hat of the relating to his official duties, it's a little bit circular, then he is acting officially. But every time he is trying to promote his candidacy and work with the campaign and work with private actors related to the campaign, then that is when he's acting unofficially. Now, you can start to see some problems there in that analysis, and just in the sense of, and this is a problem I think of the Supreme Court, is presidents do things to get elected all the time within their official duties, right? The president might take an actual policy position in a matter because they know it's popular or not popular. You could think of the position on fracking, the administration's positions on fracking or tariffs. These are things that I'm sure part of what they're thinking about is, well, is this going to help me in the campaign or not? However, there's a key distinction. I think that some people are missing this. The court, and in this filing, you can see that Jack Smith is very aware of this. The court told us, the Supreme Court that is, we're not supposed to look towards purpose. We're not supposed to look towards subjective intent when we're determining whether something is official or unofficial. That's why we're having all these crazy hypotheticals about SEAL Team 6, because you're not actually supposed to look towards the literal motivations, the subjective motivations of the president at the time they take these actions. You have to look at the objective use of their powers. You have to look at the context and sort of remove it from the sort of purpose of the particular actor acting at the time, the president. I just want to give you some space, Stephen, in case you want to So one thing I will say is Roberts was entirely wrong. He's either wrong or the country is destroyed when he said that
this ruling needs to be divorced from President Trump's case, and we need to kind of rule in a way that kind of stands the test of time, that's not just individualized to him, because we need to, because the ruling should apply to everybody. This is a ruling for Donald Trump. We cannot, the country does not survive if we're constantly electing presidents that we all want to charge with crimes. It's just, it's unbelievable. The thing that worries me, and this is what worries me, okay, is because I feel, and I think Jack Smith, who's clearly an obvious DGG listener, okay, thank you, Jack. I feel like Trump, there's a kill shot, or I won't use that word, I'm sorry, because I know it triggers some conservatives. There is a guillotine lopping the head off of, okay, Trump's main defense here, in my opinion, when it comes to this immunity ruling, because, and there are so many moving parts and so many people that get credit, but people like Richard Donahue, people like Steve Engel, people like Jeffrey Rosen, people like Eric Hirschman, all of these guys were official White House people that when Trump came to them, they said, no, we're not helping you with this. This is insane. Which means that all of Trump's actions that he was taking towards his conspiracy to flip the election was done with private legal counsel that was not involved with the White House. And Jack Smith hits on this a few times, and I'm hoping this has to be like a very big kill shot to, is that an official act or is it an unofficial act? Well, you know, because you and I think reasonable minds can disagree on, well, there are some things that, you know, could be either one. But when Donald Trump is engaged in behavior where he is exclusively relying on private legal counsel that has no affiliation and often is standing in contrast to the White House, and this is the main thing, the worry that I have that will cause my brain to explode, is if you get people on the Supreme Court trying to argue that, well, actually, I think that these were official acts taken by Donald Trump in the capacity as president when he was collaborating with and co-conspiring with and taking advice from individual attorneys that he hired in a private legal sense. I feel like that's a huge issue for Trump, and it's going to be an easy way to overcome the presumptive immunity. I hope, because he relied on so much private legal counsel. I hope.
Yeah, and you'll see, because the special counsel is very aware that you're not supposed to look to subjective intent, they're taking an objective analysis. Objective meaning they're taking the facts of the communications, who received them, and what they were objectively about, as opposed to Trump's subjective intent. And Stephen just clued you in on one of the things that they're constantly referencing: his private attorney, or he was part of the private corporation of the RNC. This is Ronna McDaniel, who's mentioned a lot of times in this filing. By the way, a lot of these names are blacked out, but because of context, we understand who these people are. So yes, those kind of objective measures about who people are, their roles, we would hope that would be some of the context that the Supreme Court is kind of pushing us towards to looking at, and that is something that Jack Smith is relying on heavily. There are government officials here in this filing. But essentially what's being argued is, because of the Hatch Act and other things, that when a government official, such as like a White House counsel, is literally doing things to promote the candidacy of Donald Trump objectively, as opposed to taking any kind of action within their purview, within their job responsibilities, that they are acting as a private, unofficial kind of conduct situation. So yes, those measures, what they're working towards, what their communications are about. Is it about the campaign? You literally have Jack Smith parsing out in certain communications to state officials, because Trump did try to coerce state officials. There are certain communications with those state officials about COVID. And Jack Smith will say in the same conversation, we're not looking towards the conversations about COVID because we recognize there could be some official duty with respect to the President of the United States talking to the states about COVID. However, when the conversation turns to objectively about the campaign and efforts to decertify, the electoral results in Michigan, that is unofficial conduct, so says Jack Smith. Quick response to that, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I think the thing that scares me the most about this being remanded to the lower courts is that there's this thing that Roberts wrote about the presumptive immunity. So these are the official acts that aren't like core exclusive powers of the president, right? And Roberts said that to challenge these, you have to show that in doing so, you will not intrude upon the vigor of the executive in carrying out these functions in the future ever. And that's a scary thing to me, because it reminds me of, I remember when after I did my home inspection, I went to get my house appraised, and I was kind of worried afterwards. I was like, okay, well, I got to get a loan for the house. They're going to come and appraise it. Well, what am I going to do if they appraise it like way less than what I want to get the mortgage for? And the appraiser person and then my real estate agent, they told me, you're willing to pay $155,000 for this house, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's what you've agreed to pay. Yeah. Well, that obviously that's what it's worth, right? You're literally going to go pay for this. Everybody else in the neighborhood is about the same. So of course they're going to appraise it at about that value. This is literally what you're willing to pay for it. Assuming there's something hugely wrong with it. I'm like, oh, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like in a literal actual sense. One thing that scares me about that presumptive immunity thing is this has never been ever, to be clear, and I want to reiterate this a billion times, okay? But because, by the way, this was the same complaint about, and I think it was somewhat of a valid complaint about Roe and I think Casey when they laid out all of these new categories of like abortion, guidelines, whatever. They're like, this looks like legislation. Why are you creating this stuff? Like you said, out of whole cloth. This presumptive immunity, the core immunity, absolute immunity, the unofficial acts. None of this exists anywhere in the history or the text of anything. There's nothing historical. There's nothing. This is the most living, breathing, constitutional, fabrication of legislation from the bench you've ever seen in your entire life. Okay. But my biggest fear is, since we've never tried a case like this before, and since there's no record of a president even making statements like this, if we're being good faith and pretending that this is all written in good faith, wouldn't it mean a lot if the only president to have been tried for a crime like this were to say as part of his defense, listen, if you're going to try me for this as a crime, I might never call a state ever to check in on a crime, to check in on an election, to check, even if I think there's fraud, I'll never do it. Well, if the only guy who's ever been tried for this crime is saying that, how do you overcome the presumptive immunity to say that, like, well, look, I don't think it would intrude at all. Okay, well, the guy that was literally in office, he says that it would intrude. So, yeah, that balancing test, that's the big part where I'm like, fuck me. I don't know how the Supreme Court is going to try to balance that.
Yeah, I totally understand your concerns. I share them, and I agree that what the court was doing was mapping on these weird doctrines from like Nixon and other cases and contexts in which they've never appeared before, and it's not supported by any of the history or the structure of the Constitution. 100%. To be clear, Jack Smith is arguing every single action that is alleged in the new indictment. There was a superseding indictment after the immunity decision to excise all of the core conduct identified as core executive, and that conduct related to the Department of Justice, Trump's usage of the Department of Justice.
Insane. Yeah. Insane that it is a core power of the president to tell your DOJ head, to tell your attorney general, you need to lie. You need to be clear that the evidence we can't use anymore is Donald Trump going to the Department of Justice saying, hey, can you lie to the states and say that we found voter fraud? And then it was William Barr saying, sorry, I'm not going to do that. Okay, bye, Barr. Rosen and Donahue come in. Hey, can you guys send out a letter lying to the state saying we found evidence of voter fraud? And then them going, well, no, I don't think so. And then Trump going, oh, okay, well, this environmental lawyer, Clark, I'm going to make him the head and I'm going to make him do it, okay? Because he'll send out that letter and fucking lie for me, okay? And then they said, okay, well, you know, your whole DOJ is going to quit on you. Good luck. And Trump's like, okay, whatever. That's an official core power of the president. And hold on, this is so important to understand, okay? Because when people say, well, the SEAL Team 6 thing doesn't make sense, and I've heard you argue, we've argued this together, I've heard a conservative respond and say, it's not a core power to assassinate political opponents. It's like, what do you mean? It is a core power to run the military and potentially to do assassinations, right? Yeah, but not to assassinate political opponents, right? And you see what they're doing there is they're intuitively fighting the Supreme Court decision, saying, well, maybe we do need to look at the intention of an action. Maybe it does require some sort of review or analysis to figure out if it's good or bad. But the immunity ruling says no, and this also pisses me off, okay? And this is why for Justice Barrett, I'm glad that she wrote this in her concurrence. I wish she would have dissented. I know she's got it in her. She's going to be the biggest warrior in the Supreme Court. I can feel it coming up, okay? And she pointed out, why did Roberts, of the 4 big actions that were talked about in the indictment, why did Roberts take the time, waste the ink and parchment to write, by the way, that DOJ stuff, that's probably core, so we're not even going to look at that. He didn't even remand that to the lower courts for review, which is absurd, because who's to say that Jack Smith wouldn't have presented it in a different way had he known that we were going to be fabricating new buckets of presidential immunity? Sorry, but yeah. Anyway, that would be the thing that's beyond judicial review now, and Jack Smith can't even approach it, yeah.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that the Chief Justice of the United States, while he is willing to address a hypothetical by Amy Coney Barrett, that is to say the bribery allegations, which is apropos because there seems to be tons of bribery allegations these days of both Democrats and Republicans. So Chief Justice Roberts does take the time to address that hypothetical. For some reason, he's silent about the parade of horribles because he has to accept that is the case, that there are some objective things the president is allowed to use, deadly force, for the purpose of national security or whatever you want to say, that a wily president could trivially come up with some pretextual memorandum stating that a political rival is a threat to the United States, and you can't look at the purpose, you can't look to the sham. And so, yeah, all of that is gone from the superseded indictment of Jack Smith. But Jack Smith says everything else is unofficial, except the court also held that conversations with Mike Pence about the certification of the vote is official. But they said that it's presumptive immunity, that it's subject to presumptive immunity, which the special counsel is going to have to give evidence or come to some argument about why it would not pose any threat to the prerogatives of the executive if they were to allow charging based on the communications to Mike Pence about the certification of the vote. So everything else, though, Jack Smith is saying is unofficial, largely because they relate to the campaign. And they're relying heavily on this precedent from the D.C. Circuit where a candidate for office, and this kind of makes sense, right? If it's true that a candidate for office can take official actions, then I guess Trump right now could be taking official action since right now he's a candidate for office. Or you could say that Joe Biden at the time, he was only doing so much as Trump could do with respect to being a candidate for office. And so that argument makes intuitive sense, and it's backed up by precedent. And so he's making a big effort to tie everything to these are related to campaigning for office in an objective measure, not subjective intent. The one area, and this also includes, by the way, conversations with Mike Pence about winning, not about the certification of the vote, but conversations with Mike Pence about the campaign and about who won or who lost. Jack Smith is saying, as between the comments to Michael Pence, you can separate even between those about the certification, which are presumptively immune, and we can rebut it, or the conversations about who won the election, did we win, did we lose, what can we do? Those are kind of the buckets that the special counsel is putting them into, and he's arguing that almost everything is unofficial. Now, what is the big so what of this document? Number one, it's 160 plus pages of great analysis, but the first section, section 1, everyone should take a look at. This is the factual story that Jack Smith is able to present, and it is chilling. There are some new things in this filing, new facts that we weren't aware of. There are facts related to Trump acknowledging that he's going to say he won, attested to by multiple people. We already knew this based on what Steve Bannon said
and
in
Roger Stone
interview.
Yeah.
But now we have like 4 or 5 people saying he said the same thing to me. He said the same thing to me, that we're going to declare victory, even regardless of who wins. We have other comments that he made about Mike Pence during January 6th, where he says, like, I don't give a shit if he lives or dies. And so there's a lot of rich detail. And
you had the comment of multiple people, I believe, attested to him being in the room where Sidney Powell was calling in, and then him muting the phone and saying, like, sounds like she's from Star Trek. She's crazy. Yeah.
And why does this matter, right? Because people will say till their dying death, that is MAGA people, Trump legitimately thought that he won the election. If you read this filing and come away with the conclusion that it is at all possible in any reasonable world that Trump thought that he won the election, you're not reading it correctly. There are multiple areas, multiple places in this filing, in this motion, where it is abundantly obvious that Donald Trump believes that he lost the election. When he says, as Stephen just referenced, all the things that Sidney Powell are saying on the phone to him in real time, mutes himself and says, she's crazy, she sounds like Star Trek. That is an admission. It's an admission that what she's saying is false. When she says when he says Tucker Carlson owned Sidney Powell on Fox News, that is an admission that what Sidney Powell is saying is false. And yet he's hawking it. He's hawking it to state legislators. He's hawking it to fake electors who are part of this conspiracy. And he's hawking it to Mike Pence and to Brad Raffensperger on a phone call, find me 11,000 votes. All of this is part of a large effort that spans from before even the election happened, where their design plan was to declare victory no matter what. And when they knew they lost, they did it anyway. And it should shock and make every American impossible for them to vote for Donald Trump for this very reason. Yeah.
You also have to be aware, like, this is not, like, when we talk about Hunter Biden, we're reading uncorroborated, what's the abbreviation for the FBI, CIA?
The FD 1023.
Yeah, you're reading these uncorroborated intel reports. You're looking at, like, public filings of transfers and emails of who's the big man, right? these are your stories that Republicans have hung their hat on in terms of there being irrefutable proof that there's corruption. When it comes to this plot for overturning the election, there
All
are
Republicans.
hundreds of hours of depositions, of on-camera testimony. The whole J6 committee, that's an 830-page report that is meticulously sourced. It is whatever you read in the Jack Smith indictment, just know that the hardest thing about putting together the case against Trump is how much do you cut? Because there is so much more beyond what's even presented. It is beyond a reasonable doubt. There are no reasonable minds that could disagree on whether or not there was an intentional plan the entire time that Donald Trump used. I have not sat through the kind of related. I went through with an editor yesterday. I finally found somebody, or 2 days ago, to put together my big J6 video that I'm working on, or whatever. Yeah, and I went through, and it took me about 6 hours to get through. And every single person that I've walked through this stuff with at the end is like, holy shit, this is actually fucking insane. And he's like,
It's 1,000 times worse
Yes.
than Watergate.
And he stopped me.
1,000 trillion
It's not
times
even
worse.
close. Watergate is
Yeah.
what the
Watergate's
FBI.
legal
What did
now.
they do? They broke in and they stole some tapes that the president knew about, or something. Like, it's so minor compared to this. It's like, who cares? It's so insane. And the worry is, I feel like J6 will be 10 years from now, like, oh, like the riot or the protest or whatever, LOL, and then that's it. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, it's just insane.
Yeah, so just to put a pin on it, I encourage everybody to read section 1 of this filing. It'll give you the full story about all the efforts, and we'll put a link as well, an annotated version of the brief, which will put you at least most of the names under that are redacted, so you can follow along and see how horrible this plan, this attempted self-coup, this eventual insurrection was. And just to be clear about what the theories here are, Trump tried to steal your vote. Trump tried to subvert the electoral count, and Trump tried to obstruct an official proceeding by, one, lying to state officials and trying to coerce them to undeclare their electoral votes and to declare them for Trump and Pence. He tried to have a fake elector coup. Then he tried to enlist Mike Pence to change the results of the election using his ceremonial role to like just declare him the winner. And then fourth and finally, he got and I would say incited an insurrection against the United States Capitol on January 6th, both in his speech in the Ellipse and specifically, and this is irrefutable, when he was aware at around 2:20 something p.m. that the Capitol had been breached, that Mike Pence was under attack. So he already knows there's violence. This is after the Ellipse. He already knows there's violence. He already knows there's a breach. He sends a tweet inciting his mob, justifying them. That is incitement of insurrection that was ongoing. And for that, I believe that Jack Smith should have charged insurrection. He didn't. But even without that, I think there's plenty here. And even without the official acts, there is so much evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump is a criminal.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's insane. It is absurd. But I guess we will see how it all plays out. I think we can argue about this. I think he should have charged incitement as well. And going over everything, I can understand why you'd want to stay away from it, but I feel like so much political conversation about hairy topics is like, here's like the spectrum of actions. What's on my camera? It's like this, and then you have like, this is like, it's a fuzzy area here, but we're like way over here. And it's like, okay, whatever the fuzzy area is, we are way, way, way beyond that. And it's, yeah.
100%. I see that we're running out of time. So
yeah,
we'll
what's
have to
skinny?
save-
One more story or something we should be
Okay.
keeping an eye open on, or yeah.
Yeah, keep an eye, all of you, both on these filings, but also what's going to happen out of X and Twitter. There are a lot of legal stories that are coming out of X and Twitter and Elon Musk that I think deserve your attention. If you guys, I don't know when you're going to get this video, but we'll be talking about it in our spaces about the dossier and the First Amendment that was in the implications of the fact that Elon Musk and the reporting that he is censoring information critical of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, the implications on the hypocrisy of the MAGA conservatives, and specifically on the efforts to try to paint the 2020 election as stolen when it wasn't, and it was fairly won by Joe Biden. But yeah, stay tuned on that news and follow us on Twitter and watch our spaces where we'll be discussing that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about that in a bit. Hopefully they have this video today or tomorrow. But thanks for joining us. I love you, Pisco. We will catch you next week.
Stay cool.
Cool. Did you hear
Awesome.
did you see the New York Times thing that Elon communicated to Trump before they even took it down? I don't know if people are stealing my talking points or not. I don't care if they are. I want credit for them. Okay. But if they are, whatever, it's fine. I saw that 4chan green post or the green text going around, and I'm like, finally, where they're like, how is it the guy that wants to put microchips in your brain, okay,
Literally.
who has satellites, is helping Trump? Like, what the
It's crazy.
It's insane.
Fucking insane. We're gonna let's do it. You're still good at like probably 2 or 2:30 or what?
Yeah, I'm going to do my thing with Lonerbox, and then I'll run upstairs and start streaming, so.
Okay, cool. Later.
Love you, bye. How you doing? Catch us up. What's been going on in the past couple weeks in world affairs? And by world affairs, I mean either Israel or Ukraine.
I mean, I need to catch up on quite a lot. So, I mean, it was breaking news, I guess, just a few days after our last talk, but Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, is dead. He was killed in an airstrike on a handful of apartment blocks in Beirut, in the Dahia suburb. I think Israel used about 80 plus tons of bombs to get to him in his underground bunker. So he's gone. Almost the entire leadership ranks of Hezbollah, the top commanders, his potential successors, a bunch of them have been taken out as well. Definitely one of his potential successors is gone, maybe a second one. It's just been one thing after another and just a series of military successes on Israel's part that have shown Hezbollah in the space of about 2 weeks to just be either completely outclassed or just, I guess, a paper tiger. So that's dominated most of the news now, and the ground operation from Israel into South Lebanon is continuing. The death toll is something over 2,000. There's no distinguishing from the health ministry of whether or not these people are militants. The health ministry probably doesn't even know. So it looks like what was termed to be a limited operation, I mean, it kind of is, but limited operation in a very, very militarized area obviously means that it's another big incursion happening right now.
So to remind people, Hezbollah is I guess you could say paramilitary or whatever organization that kind of runs southern Lebanon, although now they have a few seats in the actual Lebanese government. They are largely considered to be supported by Iran. They do a lot working with Assad in Syria, and obviously they are an instigator to the north of Israel. And they've kind of been fighting back and forth since October 7th, since the Gazan war began there. And now Israel is taking, I guess, is it a full-scale ground invasion? Are they just trying to push them, more north of the Litani River to have more area where they can't launch rockets from? Or has Israel said what their stated goal is for this particular attack? Or
So they kind of have, but in another sense, not really at all. They've said that their goal is to return the displaced 60,000 people back to their homes in the north, people who have fled because of rocket fire and anti-tank fire and everything else. That's not really a military objective, though. That's an end state of affairs for the war. Whether it means they want to push Hezbollah's military past the north of the Litani, which is this kind of small 10% of the country in Lebanon between the Israeli blue line and the rest of Lebanon, it could be that they want to push them north, although probably means that you need to explain what exactly Hezbollah is. So like you said, they're the largest non-state military in the world. They are very much in line with the IRGC and Iran. They are seen as the jewel of the axis of resistance, the big ones in the Levant. Not like Hamas. Hamas are like a contractor to Iran. Hamas will have disputes with Iran. Hamas will lose funding from Iran if they don't support Syria in the civil war, if they don't support Assad, which happened in 2013. Hezbollah are very, very linked with Iran. They are also organic, though. They're also part of the Lebanese community. They are the Shia community in Lebanon, a group of people who were historically abandoned by the Christian and Sunni elites of the country, basically made them ripe for radicalization and indoctrination in the 70s and 80s when a bunch of them were displaced by Israeli invading forces. So they are integral to Lebanese society with or without Iran's support. They depend a lot on Iran's support, but the idea of pushing them back is a kind of flawed concept because the Shia community in South Lebanon is always going to favor Hezbollah, politically or otherwise. So it's not so much about pushing them north, it's about disarming. That's really the concept that they're talking about. The reason people don't like to phrase it in that way is because pushing back sounds like you win a few battles and they retreat. Well, disarming means you're going to go house to house, find every weapon stockpile you can, destroy it, capture it, engage in urban warfare, blow up the building and the tunnel afterwards. it basically means that although it's only 10% of the country, that house is like 500,000 people. And a lot of those houses are built by Hezbollah for Hezbollah to attack Israel. So they can call it a limited incursion if they want, but limited means you're literally going house to house in hundreds of towns and villages and trying to take out stockpiles and fight with a very, still, despite everything, a very battle-hardened group, people who have been fighting since some of these Israeli soldiers were still like babies, right? They've been fighting in Syria since 2012, 2013. Some of them have still been fighting since 2006. So it's going to be pretty difficult. It's going to be pretty long. I think, despite all the successes, limited, they're not going to go for the entire country, but limited does mean there's going to be a lot of damage, a lot of maybe even irreparable damage. So
does Lebanon, does the actual Lebanese government have a military? Or is it just the...
They do. Yeah, there's a Lebanese armed forces, I think it's called. There's a running joke that the Lebanese army is maybe the 5th most powerful militant group in Lebanon.
In Lebanon? Is there any world where Hezbollah, also, is it Hezbollah or Hezbollah?
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah. Is there any world where
there's a few different ways you can pronounce it.
Sure. Is there any world where Hezbollah is so weakened that the Lebanese military can actually be the military of Lebanon, or is that a pipe dream?
So that seems to be one of the goals. The only way I think that happens is if Hezbollah, because of their total failure militarily, they might lose enough support that the Lebanese army can feel like they're in a position to take over the area. That's going to lead to a lot of backlash if they're ever seen to be doing that in collusion with Israel. So that's a big problem. They don't want to suffer the same fate as the South Lebanese army, the Christians, did in the 70s and 80s. So it is possible, but we are a long way from here to there. So as far as militant groups go in Lebanon, Hezbollah is really the only big one left. There are still some factions of Hamas kicking around in the Palestinian refugee camps, although they're quite meaningless. It is mostly just Hezbollah and the Lebanese army, but the Lebanese army is famously corrupt, quite useless. They politically have very low incentive to come off as antagonistic to Hezbollah because of how popular they are, amongst the Shias at least, and how much backlash they would get to be colluding with Israel. So it's, yeah, that might be one of the goals, although that's not really been articulated by Israel. That's probably still a long way away. Not impossible, but far away.
I wish that Israel would work a little bit more with neighbors in terms of building regional stability rather than just kind of like destroying people around them and then going back and being like, okay, we're safe now because these guys are all fucked. Because it feels like they're always kind of like, they're creating the future conditions for, or they're currently creating conditions for future conflict by not permanently solving any of the issues. Although, to be fair, I mean, could Israel permanently solve the military issue in Lebanon? Or, you know, maybe not, but I guess it's different than Gaza, you know?
Kinda. There's a big contrast between this and 2006, though, is that the last time Israel tried to kill Nasrallah seriously was in 2006. They gave a warning to the people of Dahia, South Beirut, that they were going to bomb a bunch of key locations. One was the Hezbollah headquarters, one had Nasrallah's apartment, the other one had the main TV station that they broadcast from. So they had a few targets. The warning they gave lasted anything between 18 and 24 hours. It was quite a long warning. So they give the warning, a bunch of people evacuate, they strike these locations, and I think the consensus amongst intelligence groups is that Nasrallah stayed in his building, in the bunker, but just survived the blast. And despite them hitting all their targets and flattening them to the ground, Nasrallah appeared on TV a couple of hours later. The TV station had been broadcasting from a discrete location. So they bombed this place like 20 times in different locations, but it just constantly kept broadcasting throughout the war.
I think it's like over the course of a month, didn't that station come down for like 100 minutes? It was like, I think it was broadcasting almost continuously, yeah. Yeah,
it was they completely outsmarted them on that one. So Nasrallah, after this strike, appears on TV a few hours after it's happened, and he says to the citizens of Beirut, go and look out to the Mediterranean, go look out at the sea. We are going to bomb the ship that just bombed our city. And this Israeli Navy vessel gets struck by a surface-to-shore missile that came from Iran, and it lights this massive fire in the sea, and 5 Israeli sailors die. So he did that, and to the Arab people, especially in Lebanon, that sent a really strong message. That was like, wow, this guy said he was going to do something militarily just after surviving an attack, and actually did it. He actually like got a one-up on Israel, and that's not a very common thing. Mostly, it's always rhetorical from Middle Eastern leaders. So that massively boosted his popularity, and then all the Israeli failures later on in the war only helped with that, to the point that people who historically opposed Hezbollah became massively in favor of them. Sunnis would start housing Shia refugees in their houses. Christians, even some very wealthy Christians, were starting to warm up to Hezbollah. My own family did. So it's like but that radicalization happens in two ways. One, because you're being attacked, but also because you're being attacked and you're actually fighting back effectively. I don't know if Hezbollah are going to achieve the exact same
Victory
results,
now.
given that they have been so militarily humiliated. And Nasrallah is, you would think for a religious group, people like Nasrallah might be easy to replace because there's not much ideological diversity in religious fundamentalism. But that's not entirely true, because Nasrallah is a very charismatic person, He had a very good way of engaging with the average Lebanese person because he came from an urban Beirut environment. He was quite poor. He had a commoner's accent. He told jokes. He was very funny, like charismatic, and he had been there for a while. He survived for a long time. So he was able to build up support even from outside of traditional Shia communities. If you look at his replacements, they're like, it's not even worth naming them half the time. It didn't even really get that high in the news when the number 2s and the number 3s were dying, because no one knew who they were. No one cared who they were.
I definitely noticed in going over the history of Israel that the individual people are incredibly important, that the outcomes of history are not inevitable insofar as the leadership is concerned. Like, it really matters who's at what place at what time. And then it's funny you bring up Nasrallah blowing up the ship in the ocean. It reminds me of, I don't believe it wasn't the Samu incident, but I think it was later on. It was sometime in the mid or late 60s. It's when Arafat was part of a resistance camp or whatever, and I think Israel came in to invade or came in to blow something up, and I think the Jordanian military came back and they managed to fend them off. But the king of Jordan was willing to give Arafat all the credit, and all of the Palestinians and surrounding Arabs that saw Arafat, the perception is, wow, he actually beat back the Israeli military, this ragtag group of Fedayeen fighters, and that was like Arafat's like crowning moment where he started to become the representatives of the Palestinian people, and he started to gain a lot of notoriety, well, not notoriety, a lot of fame, I guess, in that world as well. So a lot of parallels there, I guess, between him and Nasrallah.
Yeah, it does show you how even minor military successes, because they're against an army that is so historically dominant, can get you so far in that area. But it also shows you how it doesn't always last. So if there's a poll from the Arab Barometer not long ago, polling in Gaza and the West Bank, and whilst Hamas have retained a lot of their popularity in the West Bank throughout this war, I think the last poll had Hamas at like 6%. It was really, really low. It seems that disillusionment has finally happened in the region, because now the broad military sort of battalion style conflict is kind of done. Now it's sort of Hamas re-emerging in these areas as the IDF starts to leave and move around, and Hamas are starting to re-emerge as these kind of almost like mob rule rather than a legitimate government. So their legitimacy has been really, really hammered by this, even though it was only a year ago when they pulled off October 7th, which was the biggest Palestinian military achievement ever, really. So it doesn't seem to last very long. But I think looking forward now, the big question is really coming over what happens between Israel and Iran, because Iran is supposed to be the big ally of Hezbollah. They're supposed to be the sort of like the leader of the axis of resistance. And in April, they launched a bunch of missiles at Israel and warned the Americans ahead of time that they were going to do it. So everything was intercepted, basically, minimal damage. They did another strike after the death of Nasrallah just recently that was about twice as big. There was some damage. The only person who died was a Palestinian in Jericho who got killed by the casing of a missile. But it does show you that Iran are kind of starting to play with fire a little bit, because they can't do nothing anymore. They have to do something, but they also don't want to do enough to provoke legitimizing a strike that might actually really, really hurt them.
Yeah.
So that's a really big question right now. And there's so much. I guess we could talk about the internal politics in Iran that's kind of shaping this.
Yeah, we can. I thought, real quick, I wish that dude, I've just recently had a couple. Do you know Einat Wolf is? Israeli lady?
She's written about refugees, right?
I think she does quite a bit, but I just did 2 conversations recently. One was with, a writer for Haaretz called Gideon Levy.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Okay, that was a laugh. Okay. Yeah. Well, I just spoke with both of them back to back. It was actually an hour apart on. But I had a conversation with Jake Newfield, not Joshua, Jake Newfield. I had a conversation with both of them, and I run into the same issues where when I'm talking to the pro-Zionist, the crazy Zionist person, I come off as like the most like bleeding heart pro-Palestinian shill ever, because they're like, the Israelis just have wanted peace the whole time. They've never wanted anything. The Palestinians hated them just because they were Jews. There was no other reason. It was just anti-Semitism through and through, and it's just been this horrible, evil crusade against Jews the entire time. And then on that was ANAT. And then on Gideon's side, it was the Palestinians have absolutely no agency whatsoever. They're basically rape victims the entire time. The Jews just came here and through their racism have just murdered indiscriminately Arabs, and they've wanted to. And it's just like both sides are so insane. Looking at the Iranian attacks on Israel, I feel like it's a really big deal that you have people like Saudi Arabia and Jordan that are assisting with the interception of the missiles. There is, at least among leadership, there is like a common united purpose. And in the population of Israel itself, you do have 2 million, Arabs or Palestinian Arabs, who are living basically peacefully inside that country. Not to say that it's totally devoid of crime or anything else, but there was no third intifada. There's no like mass uprising. There's no mass crime. And the West Bank is more or less like pretty chill as well, although you have had since October 7th, your moments for sure. I wish that Israel could just capitalize on that more and show like some kind of willingness to take a leadership role and saying like, hey, look, like we are all kind of like getting along together. I feel like, the MBS, I feel like the Jordanian monarchy, it feels like the Arab leaders have taken more steps in asserting that, in affirming that. And it feels like Netanyahu and the Israeli government just hasn't taken as big of a step in saying like, look at our partners, look at our allies, like look at, I don't know, maybe I've missed it, but I wish that they could shore up, those differences more, because that Palestinian issue inside of Israel is just, it's a vector through which so much instability is caused. And I feel like it doesn't need to be that way, but yeah.
I really think they do that at their own peril in a way, because there's always an example that comes up in peace process debates. When people talk about the Arab Peace Initiative, 2002, there's like an example of an Arab offer from every Arab League nation and the Palestinians saying that we're going to offer you this 2-state solution outline. And if you just come to the table, like that would be a really good gesture. And this will be the thing that Israel turns down famously, because Sharon just says it's a waste of time. He says he doesn't trust it. And I think even...
We had, what was it? Yossi Balin, I think we were chatting with, and he said it to you or he said it to me, where he said Sharon told him, I think in 2004, he was like, I would never ever trust an agreement from any Arab ever. I don't trust them. Which was like, okay.
They do that. They completely do that at their peril, though, because later on it did actually turn out that the Arab Peace Initiative, this is not a very well-known story, but actually before Olmert did his 2008 deal with Abbas, he did actually give a little bit of a signal towards that Arab Peace Initiative. They tried to set up meetings, but the problem was that the only, I think, conference or meeting that they had, I think maybe 2 or 3 people turned up, but they were all from states that had already made peace with Israel, and they couldn't even come with an Arab League mandate. They just came as individuals. So it kind of showed that this was really just maybe a bit of a troll, or just like something like an empty gesture, more like. But again, the problem is that to the rest of the world, Israel doesn't know how to respond to olive branches that come from the Arab states. Just recently, there was that viral clip from a Jordanian foreign minister, I think it was foreign minister, who interrupted one of the other speeches at a conference to say that we are offering guarantees to Israel in exchange for a Palestinian state. We're offering to guarantee security, and Israel's only solution to any of these problems is just go there, destroy people, destroy the military, go there, destroy someone, just go there, destroy someone, just kill, kill, kill. And he gave this really powerful speech about that. And the Israelis could easily say the famous Menachem Begin quote. They could just say, I like guarantees, but I also need a guarantee that guarantees the guarantees. Jordan's not going to get Hamas or Hezbollah to stop firing, but the fact that there's not even any attempt to try to start something with willing Arab partners is just it's something that Israeli right-wingers have done since the last 20 years, and they do it completely at their peril. I think it's honestly actually Balin, I read him saying this, is that the problem is that for half of Israelis is whenever an Arab leader comes with any kind of olive branch, they don't know how to react to it. It's like they just think it has to be either a lie or insincere or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a big problem.
There's mandatory elections coming up soonish for Israel, right?
I think so. It's hard to tell because they've had so many elections in the space of 4 years.
Okay, maybe not. All
I
right.
don't know when the mandatory one is, yeah.
Internal politics for Iran. Is that where you wanted to go next?
Yeah. So the big question now, because Iran conducted this second strike on Israel, that it did actually cause a little bit of damage compared to the first one, Israel has vowed they're going to retaliate. I believe Yoav Gallant said that he would promise a lethal, precise, and especially surprising response. The Americans have been very vocal in saying, don't attack the nuclear sites. That attack hasn't happened yet. I think the Israelis are currently in Yom Kippur, or they're in some festival, I think, at some point. So it might not come anytime like immediately, but it is expected. The last counterattack they did in Iran was very small. It was just like a tit for tat. This time, I think people are expecting something more. But there's this whole question that people might be asking is like, this might be Israel's big opportunity to get the Iranian nuclear site. And people are asking why they don't do that. There's a few reasons I actually uncovered looking into it, is that everyone seems to agree that Iran is enriching their nuclear capabilities, their uranium enrichment is happening at a higher scale than you would ever expect for legitimate civilian use. So we know that's happening. Apparently, though, according to CIA Director Bill Burns, if they ever decide that they want to start to enrich enough material for weapons-grade use, that would be picked up by Intel quite quickly, even if it only takes them about a week to do so, and it would still take them months to weaponize properly.
Yeah, so I would have to I'd have to go look this up again because my knowledge is pretty outdated, and maybe I misread something before, or just saying low conviction take. But my understanding is that like you can't like enrich uranium in like your basement. You have to have these like really large centrifuges, like the infrastructure and the energy required and everything produced would like everybody in the world would see you doing it. You can't do this covertly.
Yeah, that's just for the enrichment. That's not even for the actual weaponization, which would take months to do. So everyone kind of understands that if they start moving towards proper weaponization, it would get picked up. And the consensus is that Israel and America would just immediately see that as casus belli, and they would just bomb it. All right? So that's the idea. So there's no point doing anything before that excuse is given. The problem is that it still doesn't really explain why they're doing that, because some people in Iran will say that they're doing it as their own personal deterrent against strikes against them. But Iran has already, in the last year, they've attacked countries that have nuclear weapons. Right? They've attacked Israel and Pakistan. So deterrent's not really a reason. The more difficult internal issue with Iran, which is actually a little bit scary, is the further radicalizing of the IRGC. So the IRGC is like, they control about half of the Iranian economy, about 200,000 members.
Just as a quick thing, so the IRGC is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is like I believe the foreign branch of the Iranian military. And I believe that the Iranian Guard Corps has allocated to it like official revenue streams that the government, I don't believe, can even touch. Like there are parts of like the revenue of that economy government that are guaranteed to go to funding the IRGC that the government doesn't even like have a hand in. So they're very independent, very much. That was that's the branch that Soleimani was the head of, that the United States assassinated a few years ago. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then more specifically, they have the IRGC Quds Force, which is the one that's devoted to all the attacks against Israel, and that's where people like Soleimani are involved in. Mm-hmm. The problem with the IRGC, though, is that everyone knows that Iran struggles with disloyalty, that a lot of their citizens really dislike the regime. That's been the case for decades, and it's also actually been a problem within the IRGC. So in the 90s, when Iran has a presidential election, the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, will give an endorsement. In the 90s, an entire second generation of IRGC members voted for someone else. So what the IRGC did in the 2000s was this very, very concerted effort to make the movement more explicitly ideological, like more committed to the Islamist cause. So they invested so much into education or indoctrination and radicalization programs, to the point that since the 2000s, I think 50% of training for the IRGC is just indoctrination. The problem is that that's also kind of backfiring now. So now the issue is that rather than being disloyal in a more moderate sense, the newer generation of IRGC members are the most radical ones there have been. More radical actually than the Ayatollah. So now the issue is that in one of the last presidential elections, the candidate endorsed by the Supreme Leader was rejected by a lot of IRGC youth, but for someone more radical. To the point that the older IRGC guard actually had to start backing someone who was seen as more of a kind of like parliamentarian reformist. So the issue now is that their efforts to pull the IRGC in line is backfiring and producing a much more radical youth wing of the movement that even the older members don't really feel comfortable with. And these IRGC members are great if you want to suppress protests and open fire on demonstrators, as they've done in 2019, they've done in 2022, 23. But it's not good if you're trying to contain yourself from a regional conflict, from escalating a regional conflict. And a lot of these young IRGC radicals believe that the regime is just not responding to Israel in the way that they should because they're scared. So whilst people in America might be hoping for regime change from popular, democratic, secular public, there is also the other issue, which means that the other revolution that could happen in Iran is a radical extremist hardline push from the youth. And given that Iran has successfully quelled popular dissent for the last couple of decades fairly easily, I feel like the young radical element is maybe going to be the force that they have to reckon with a lot more seriously. And that is a slightly scary prospect for the future.
Well, that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Do you have any other final things for us? What's stuff that we should keep in mind, I guess, for the future? Anything on the horizon that we should be looking forward to?
Looking forward to?
Besides the U.S. elections.
U.S. elections, well, I mean, the war in the Middle East is probably not going to get any less bloody anytime soon. I would like to think it's maybe a slight wake-up call for people who support this idea of the axis of resistance or Iran, Hezbollah, and everything else. I think hopefully there's becoming a bit of an awakening. There already has been in places like Syria and all the rest of it. But the problem with these forces is that, yes, Hezbollah did achieve quite a bit in 2006. They exaggerated how much they achieved. But at the end of the day, these groups have always been far better at killing Arabs in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon than they ever have been at messing with Israel. So hopefully that's something that becomes the dawn on people going forward.
All right. Well, thanks for the update. Hopefully I'll catch up with you next week. And yeah, I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Man, bro, Israel fucked Hezbollah up. Like,
Paper Tiger.
hardcore. Oh my God.
You ever seen The Black Knight from Monty Python?
Yes.
I feel like every Hezbollah guy's speech is just that now. It's like they lose another limb and he's just like, it's but a scratch. The rules have changed.
Yeah. I didn't hear no bell. Yeah. Jesus. Okay. Well, I'm going to go stream soon. I love you. Stay safe. Be careful, buddy.
Oh,
What?
I meant to ask you. For next week, has anyone else